and we'll get started with the conversation. As we start, uh, I'm happy to say a little bit about what I'm up to. I don't think we need to introduce Garry Kasparov, um, but
I'm back,
maybe.
yes?
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, fine.
I was saying I don't think we need to introduce you to this audience, uh, but since a number of folks might not know who I am, let me take the liberty of just giving a quick introduction. So I'm Tim Mack. I'm a reporter of more than 16 years, former U.S. Army medic, now based in Kyiv, Ukraine, where I run a publication called The Counteroffensive. And what we do with the counteroffensive is rather than just tell you in a traditional news format, here's what happened today, we go deep into the life of someone who is experiencing the news and use that to illustrate the current events. Um, we also have a second publication, Counteroffensive Pro, which covers as a trade publication the ins and outs of Ukrainian defense technology and innovation. So we talk about the really technical side of the regulatory environment for people that invest in Ukrainian defense startups and things like that, and the latest battlefield technologies that are coming off the front lines. That's what we're up to. Um, but Garry, I'm so pleased to chat with you today, and so pleased to kind of get a chance to chat about geopolitics in general and what looks to be a very, very uh, dangerous world and a dangerous period of history. Well, let's take us past the headlines for a moment and take us past the latest outrage. From your perspective, are we seeing a bifurcation in the world, a trifurcation? Are we seeing a splitting apart? If you were to look at this from a 40,000-foot view, how do you see the pieces moving around?
Um, Not sure I can look at from the 40,000 point of view, but I probably try to go not up, but back in history. I think it's very important to understand that, whatever is happening now, how tragic it is, it's still, had certain lessons in the past that we have to take into account to understand the nature of what's happening. It's whether it's bifurcation or trifurcation or whatever, it's the end of the old order. So, and it's not unique. And typically, no matter how tragic it is, every change, of the world order had a war, a major war that played a crucial role both in social political changes, but also in technological changes. So if you go back to, it's just, 18th century, end of 17th, beginning of 18th century. So the war for Spanish succession, basically between Britain and France. So major war, 12 years. So this 7 years war in the middle of the century, 7 years. So the global Napoleonic Wars, nearly 2 decades. American Civil War, 4 years. So I'm talking about the wars that changed the landscape, both technologically and on the battlefield, but also these had massive applications for political arrangements and also for the societal structures. World War I, 4 years. World War II, 6 years. So the Ukrainian war, if you may call it that, and I think that's how it will probably end up in history. This is it's Russian aggression, but I think it's the Ukrainian war. I say it has a global implications. This is the war that basically buries the old order. So everything I used to live in the world is after World War II. I think it was already doomed in 1991, but it took too long. And I think the tragedy today is very much the result of shortcomings of the Western democracies, primarily the United States, to offer a new vision for the world. And now, unfortunately, this change has been implemented. Again, it's implemented sounds like a good word, but I try to be technical, by dictators, namely Putin. So they basically, saw the opportunity. And what predators do when they see opportunity to go after their prey, they go. So this war was already the 4th year, and I'm afraid, we'll see probably just, it's the continuation of this tragic war and and brutal Russian aggression and all the crimes committed by Putin's troops for some time, at least for some time. So I would be very surprised. Again, I'm praying for that if the war ends this year. I think it's a war of attrition eventually, and it's a war that cannot end before Putin is defeated. So that's another important lesson. This kind of wars do not end before the root cause is being eliminated. Putin is shouting, and with his propaganda, that root cause is Ukraine, Nazification. The root cause is Putin. The root cause is Putin's Russia. Actually, going deeper, I continue historical analogy, the root cause is the very existence of last empire, Russian Empire. So before its tragic multi-century history ends, this war will continue. And the war, by the way, it's not just Ukraine, because Putin's war is more global. And Ukraine is one of the stops. It's a main battlefield now, but as we know, he has much bigger plans going beyond.
Do you see? I mean, what I hear a lot here in Kyiv is a kind of echo of what you're saying, which is that the war, there may be a ceasefire, there may even be an agreement at some point, but the war doesn't end until Russia shatters into its component parts and Russian imperialism as an ideology splits apart. Do you see? Do you see any vulnerabilities there? Because it doesn't strike me that I've seen a lot of signals in that general direction.
The dictatorial regimes, they always look strong, but there are fundamental problems, deep under the surface. Today, Putin's Russia, and that's something that many Western politicians still don't want to accept as a reality. It's a giant war camp. Everything that is happening in Russia now connected to war one way or another. War has become, for Putin, the main instrument of keeping power. And if you look at every layer of Russian life, whether it's politics or economy or propaganda or social life, education, everything is war connected. So is it sustainable? I think not. But it may last because unfortunately Russia has resources. And it's also unfortunate that the free world shows very little appetite to actually to go after these resources. So it's still a shame that, in the 4 years of the war, most of Russian missiles that are shooting at you guys there now, they have Western components, actually mainly Americans. So how come? So this is, everybody talks big. We will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. We help you. But if you separate words from actions, as little has been done to win the war. They all hope that, maybe one day the war goes away. Maybe, just something happens. They all try to push the envelope to the next guy or a next politician who will take over.
Gary, I want to take the opportunity kind of to chat with you about some of these deeper geopolitical and even maybe human issues, which, I think of this as someone who, graduated university in about 2008, around this time where there's a real feeling around the world that democracies could be spread and that freedom was a sort of innate, inherent human value, that people desired freedom very dramatically. And I've struggled with this belief of mine, which has been my traditional belief, in recent years, as I've kind of looked around and I've seen that people do want freedom, but maybe in even deeper human desires to crush the people they hate more, and they're willing to give up dramatic amounts of freedom in order to achieve that. What do you think is closer to the truth when it comes to what humans inherently want when it comes to their government and their societies?
I don't think you can have universal rule that could apply to every corner of the world because people have very different experiences. But at the end of the day, they want a good life. They want an ability to feed their families, to raise their families, to see their kids get educated, to have jobs. Probably now to travel around because they know more about the world, and also just these demands are changing because people's knowledge of the world keeps increasing. So when I graduated to university back in the 80s, so we just had fax machines as the greatest technology. It's the mobile phones, they were not available in my part of the world back in 85, 86. So it's, and of course, internet has existed in ARPANET form, in a labs somewhere in America. So it's the 40 years later, it's everything that's happening in the world is just, one click away. From person, no matter where he or she lives, in Argentina, in Canada, in Britain, or in Singapore, or in South Korea. So and that's why again it's a bit difficult, just to have a common denominator. Though I still think that there's normal human instincts. The problem is not what people want. The problem is how they're willing to pay for that. We all want a good meal. How are we willing to pay for this? And then, then comes this big issue. So how important is freedom, individual freedom for that? And then, of course, we have very different experience. Obviously, the answer from Americans might be different from answer from people who live in Africa. Though in America today, we see a lot of people who think that, it's maybe freedom is not that important, even in the United States. So you mentioned 2008, but I think that was already the moment where the push for democracy has been sliding. I remember 1991. That was the big moment. And it's not surprisingly that next year, the best-selling book was Francis Fukuyama, The End of History. And I have to confess that, I like the concept. I was among those who believed that, the victory of in the Cold War was a milestone in human history. And of course, nobody would go back. Of course, Russia would move, to the West. Of course, the West, not geographic, but just the West, ideological West. Of course, the free market dominated. Soviet Union collapsed. So it was the best illustration that the market economy, liberal democracy always, beat a totalitarian regime with a central planning economy. Not so fast. So this is something we forgot, or we just didn't understand at the time, that evil doesn't die. Yes, for a moment, maybe for years, it could be buried under the rubble of Berlin Wall. But the moment we lose our vigilance, the moment we turn to be complacent, it sprouts out. Yes, in 91, 92, we all were just, in mood to celebrate. Just 8 years later, Bin Laden was ready to strike. And Putin took over in Russia, the KGB guy. So that tells us that we missed the moment to actually to lay down new rules. Again, it was America's responsibility. But collective West had to come up with a plan, not to rely on institutions that played its role, like United Nations, but they never had a cohesive ideology behind it. Yes, everybody signed the Declaration of Human Rights. Half of the countries then and 2/3 of countries now just only pay lip service. Some of them even don't pay lip service now. So they already back then they already looked at the United Nations as an opportunity to actually to protect them against what they thought onslaught of democracy, and use United Nations platform as a shield to promote their own ideas that were very contrary to our values. And today, we live in a world that has outdated institutions that offer no solutions. And I think that somehow the war was inevitable, because the other side of the planet, which is the dictatorial and authoritarian regimes, they were forced into this conflict, because in a world where everything is connected and we know everything about, people who live in other part of the planet, Iron Curtain doesn't stay anymore. It's to explain to, let's talk about Russia, to sell to Russians Putin's lifelong rule, they have to come up with a plan. You always need a legacy for a dictator. And the only dictator for Putin, the only legacy for Putin, for a dictator like Putin, is a conflict. Conflict is something that can generate ideological meanings. So this is it creates a background that protects him against accusations of corruption and mismanagement. So it's the same is correct for other regimes, non-democratic regimes. So that's why, again, this is we reached a point where the weakness of the free world in unwillingness to come up with a global strategy ended with us being not proactive but reactive.
And this is where I think this is where my thinking has changed dramatically. I mean, you were talking about the end of the Cold War being one of your defining personal moments. The 9/11 and then the failures, particularly by the United States in the global war on terror to spread democracy around the world, has really shaped my views on what we need to do in the future to establish freedoms for people. And what you said right there, I think really encapsulates how much people are willing to give up their own personal freedom as long as they see other people they supposedly dislike getting absolutely crushed. You can see this in the sectarian violence in the Middle East. You can see this with the way that your rank and file Russian citizen might be willing to totally cast away what you were saying earlier, which is a good life and education for their children and families, as long as those Ukrainians across the streets aren't doing well. I mean, this imperialism. The heart of imperialism is this sort of uh, this sort of sadistic view about other people and how they don't deserve the freedoms that we deserve, and that we ought to crush them, and that, by the way, we ought to rally around some strong authoritarian figure in order to crush them. This is a very, very, very common authoritarian view. Um, but one of the vulnerabilities of democratic societies, um, as democratic societies have thrived in the 90s and into the 2000s and to about the present age, the vulnerability as technology has advanced has shown that uh, we're so open to attacks in the information sphere that authoritarian governments absolutely love infiltrating and spreading chaos and informational filth into our ecosystems. But that I've always liked the description of Russian information warfare as just pumping sewage from all angles into the information ecosystem. Extreme views on all sides. It doesn't matter where people decide to end up as long as they're radicalized as much as possible. Is there a way, Gary, to take the good of democracy and eliminate some of these vulnerabilities that we need to have in order to have a free society? The freedom of speech and assembly, the freedom of the right to petition, all these things that we hold dear, they also create a vulnerability for foreign bad actors to come in, particularly when we have bots and online social media, for them to come in and disrupt our democratic processes.
Yeah, it's quite ironic, huh? So that technology that has been conceived, invented, designed in the free world has been actively used by the other side, by the bad actors, to undermine the very democracy, the free society that created all of this. But again, it's not nothing new. So dictatorships, they cannot compete with the free world innovations, but they have no limitations. They are unbound when it comes to using all methods, even the dirtiest methods. And the answer to the question is that before we discuss a strategy, we have to understand we are at war. And I'm not telling you that. I'm simply referring to Putin or to Xi Jinping, who is not, of course, that explicit, but it's a war against us. North Korea, Iran, they all are fighting because they believe that their well-being, their dictatorial well-being, them staying in power, it's kind of prerequisite to be in a conflict, because that's the only way to explain why people in Russia live not as well as people in Estonia or people in North Korea. They just, they live in horrible conditions compared to their cousins, brothers and sisters in the South. So, or, in China. So yes, China is making huge success, but you look at the Chinese people in Taiwan, you understand that, the communist system is not the best one to utilize the talents of Chinese people. So it's It's a war, and we're still trying to pretend that we're not at war. We're still trying, so we means, the free world. We're still trying to find compromise. We are not recognizing the very simple fact that, fighting back is important, because it's the virus. It's spreading. You don't negotiate with cancer, you cut it off, or it will spread out. So you talked about, this is all the tribalism. In America now we have the problem. So it's the what was America's strength of American democracy, the open communication. Yes, I disagree with you, but we can talk about it now. Information bubbles on both sides. So you can hardly actually make people talk to each other. And that's one of the biggest accomplishments of the war on us, hybrid war, launched by dictators. Again, ironically, using technology that we invented. And it's not going to change unless leadership on both sides of the Atlantic, in America and in Europe, will simply recognize the fact. I mean, European politicians, they are still trying to operate within the consensus basis. I mean, how on earth you can have Hungary, a Trojan horse, Putin Trojan horse, in EU as a member of EU? Last year, Hungary was even a president, has a presidency for 6 months. Because you have rules. Yes, because you have to follow the rules. Yes, those rules written for the time of peace. But at war, you have to fight. Yeah, you can end up this rebellion very simple. So 6 months, no money, no vote. No, you didn't do that. Now you have Fico. Now you have Slovakia. It's spreading. The cancer is spreading. And what they're doing? Nothing. Fico is going to Moscow to the parade, which will put in display the forces that are committing crimes in Ukraine. And again, European Union doesn't recommend. It does. Hell, just cut Slovakia from the funds. Let people there rise.
Garry, let me. I want to return to something that you said about how the information warfare is turning us against each other in America, and I thought a lot about how my relationship with my Republican friends have changed, particularly the kinds of Republicans that have become very supportive of Trump. And I would say 10, 15 years ago, I had a ton of Republican friends. How has your relationship with Republicans in your life, to the extent that you have them, changed over the last couple of years with the rise of Trump? Have you noticed it changing your social life and the way you think of politics, not just as policy choices, but as values orientations that you can or cannot associate with?
Look, it's not, one-way street. Yes, it did change. And some of my old friends, again, we never broke, quote unquote, officially, but simply stop talking, because I just don't want to upset people. Some of them older than me. Yeah, because but you should look at the other side as well. So this is the craziness on the other side. So just it's I think separating one side from another, might be a mistake. Obviously, the Republicans, the MAGA is a much bigger problem today because they have levers of power. But the fact that we have MAGA now in power, it's very much the reaction of many Americans in the middle to the power abuse or intellectual power abuse from the left. Again, it's a historical cycle. We always had the rise of the left responding to some of the ills of the society, social justice. And if it went too far, then you had like a pendulum shifted on the other side. You had the counter reaction, counter offensive, you call it, on the other side. And that's, again, it's not nothing new. Obviously, it's new for America. But you had communists and then Hitler. So the far left always comes first. But the problem is that MAGA bigger than woke. So that's why, just if you try to actually to fight, from ideological purity of the left, you will lose. What we need is basically now to fight for the constitutional order. So it's very important to actually build a big tent. It's no longer, we have to concentrate on cultural wars. I may agree or disagree with some policies, but the moment you start talking policies, you offer Trump and MAGA big advantage. Because some of the policies, like on immigration or on DEI or on transgenders, they have massive support in the society. The moment you narrow your thrust and you talk about constitutional values, it's not about what Doge is doing that, that may hurt us because they cut this and that. I agree, I take it. Those is unconstitutional. That's where you have to start. So it's not about policies, it's about the method, because we have to restore the framework of conversation. We have to go back to the moment where we could talk to each other and find, okay, maybe
But
I disagree with you on this or that, but we agree on something. Right now, it's this again, they're bubbles, and that's that's the way to feed extremism on both sides. But of course, now the extremism on the right, on the Republican side, because Donald Trump and all the things he has been doing, as we speak now, this is the biggest danger. But you cannot beat it unless you recognize that there is also a problem on the other side that helped Trump. It's like it's a live feed for Trump. So that's why if you follow Fox, and by the way, I have two screens every day, Fox and CNN, because I have to compare. I don't have stomach to read Newsmax, but but Fox and CNN. And what Fox is doing is just they concentrate on policies, and they always show that Trump has certain support. And CNN is not concentrating, in my view, on constitutional issues. This is wrong. This is unconstitutional. We're not talking about ideology or about specific policies. It will be later when we go back to normalcy. And unless we have the strategy of fighting against what I'm afraid could be the destruction of American Republic. So in 2026, the midterms will not be a simple automatic landslide for opposition, because Trump will definitely use every level of power to make sure that elections is being controlled.
the thing is that 15 years ago, we could have a conversation about, what do you think the appropriate healthcare policy is in America? Do you think the marginal tax rate ought to be at this rate or at that rate? And now the conversation is, do you think January 6th was an unconstitutional overthrow of the government? Do you believe that vaccines work? Do you think that immigrants deserve due process? I mean, at a certain point, it's not a policy disagreement; it's a character issue. It's a values disagreement, and it's a values disagreement that I so desperately want to differentiate myself from and distance myself from the opposing side, because I think it's morally wrong, and that's what makes that conversation difficult to have in present times.
I couldn't agree more. Again, so I just have to remind you that the lies about Biden's health and about mental ability to run the country, that's also fuel the other side, and they kept repeating it. So as if one wrongdoing can justify another. But what I'm seeing now, I mean, this is the Trump's cabinet and the way they've been praising Trump. It's not even Soviet Union. It's more like North Korea now. It's just, I couldn't even imagine, just when I grew up, them saying it publicly. Okay, maybe close, but it's still very hard for me to comprehend that I'm listening to America 2025, not Soviet Union 1975. Again,
Well,
you
what's
have
the
people
problem?
like Besson or Bondi. I mean, you thought about them as just being, the individuals, these successful individuals with a certain degree of self-respect. I mean, you look at Trump and you know that he totally screwed everything he touched. And now the most consequential president, actually most consequential probably is true, because nobody could screw up more, magnificently than Trump did in 100 days. But still, just all this praise. It's just, why the hell are you doing that? I mean, Marco Rubio used to be this individual. I mean, I knew him well. I mean, it's just the guy just, looked to me as not reincarnation of Reagan, but somebody who was devoted to part of Reagan and McCain. And now it's kind of, he kind of a zombie, who just, follows, there's the orders of the boss, and just without any questions. And that's what he said at the hearings in the Senate, that I'm not having any policy. I'm here to advise the president. Hell no. This is you're there, just to offer ideas, and not simply just to be trying to direct your agency at the whim of a man with very little, if any, ideas about how the world works.
The thing is that over the last few months, in the second Trump term, I haven't been surprised about that many things that Trump has done. It is it's kind of what you what has surprised me is the gleefulness with which one particular group of Americans seems to be approaching the oppression of and crushing of certain minority groups in America, the vulnerable, um, and in particular immigrants. It's not so much that I'm surprised that Trump would take the steps he's taken on immigration. It's that it's the gleefulness which a certain segment of the population has approached it, and how they've been so willing to embrace a certain kind of cruelty that I just didn't think that I would see in America, and I don't recognize it. I mean, do you feel the same way?
Yes, but I think I have an explanation because human nature changes very slow. So yes, we are very different from what we were 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, even 50 years ago. We could see that the level of tolerance in a free society kept growing. So just American history is the best illustration. So just it's the and universal suffrage and basically fundamental rights for every minority group that have been won of the hard struggle. That's the best illustration. But it's it's not universal. You always have people who are not happy with these changes. And if you start, just pushing it too hard, so again, if you destroy this delicate balance that that America always managed to uh, keep, though some of the issues were so contentious that it needed civil war to resolve, like slavery. But there's always a segment of population that has these instincts deep down. And if all of a sudden the system that kept them at bay is weakened, goes up. So it's like, sleeping beast somewhere. It's always there. But it's very important for us to understand that we'll never reach, this society where just everybody agrees on everything. So there are always this instinct. It's human instincts. That's to react. And you have to be very, very cautious in keeping this balance. And we lost control of that. And unfortunately, our enemies, they could sense it. So I always call Putin a merchant of doubt, because I think this is the key element of Russian propaganda now. They're not selling you a concept. It's not like Marxism, Leninism, communism. They are not telling you that, oh, we're great, you bad. They say, well, bad. So they found the right angle to spread these doubts and to make people feel, okay, maybe it doesn't matter. So what's the difference? They still elections in Russia. There's still elections here as well. So it's very important to dilute our values. And it seems now that we to restore this our unity of our society, we need to make sure that we agree on something, because right now we're concentrating on something we disagree, and it makes more and more people angry and angry, and angry people. We're still people. It's still human nature. They look for somebody who can encapsulate this anger and to offer them the way out. And of course, the easiest way out is someone is guilty. Immigrants, this one, not just other groups, all minority groups. And if people feel that, they have not been treated well, and of course, Biden's policy of immigration donated or just, contributed quite greatly to raise this sentiment in the society. I traveled across the United States and I heard people, just ordinary people, my drivers. Typically, my best polling group is drivers from the airport to the conference, and South Carolina, Arizona, then Colorado, Wisconsin. I heard the same stories, and I could feel that this anger is there, and of course we should give credit to Trump, who knew how to capitalize.
Garry, Let me ask you whether you think whether you think this peace process, the so-called peace process that the Trump administration is trying to oversee, um, as it relates to the war here in Ukraine, what do you think the most likely outcome is going to be from this effort to try to establish a ceasefire?
It's interesting. In your question, you started with peace process and ended up with a ceasefire, which is, of course, it's a correct description. Ceasefire, I hope it can be accomplished at one point, though I still doubt I doubt. But as for the war, this war cannot end until one side, you know, uh, wins and another loses. So the tragic outcome of Putin wins and Ukrainian statehood is being destroyed, which was, is, and will be Putin's ultimate goal. Again, it's not Garry Kasparov saying, they have been saying this. So whatever they offer as a cover-up, denazification and all other nonsense, NATO's, it's about destruction of Ukrainian statehood. And by the way, Russian Empire has a long history. It's just before Putin, before Bolsheviks, of eliminating Ukrainian, even the signs of Ukrainian statehood, and of course Ukrainian culture and language. It's a long history. So
Gary, when I'm here in Ukraine obviously over the last 15 plus years has a real tradition of popular and political mobilization. We saw it in the various color revolutions, the Maidan revolution, and there is a view among Ukrainians that's quite prevalent, which is we stood up against cynicism and apathy and overthrew a dictator. Why can't the same thing happen in Russia? Why aren't ordinary Russians standing up to do something about it? That Ukrainians have put their lives on the line multiple times. Why can't these next door neighbors in Russia do the same? Why do you think that is?
no, it's the countries are very close, but not the same. So Russia is still an empire, and I think in 1991 we didn't understand, while supporting Yeltsin and shouting democracy and just expecting Russia to change forever, that the imperial monster has survived. The Soviet ideology, the communism, was a cover-up. It's like a makeup, but it was not a core. The core was an empire, and I think the both countries, they walked in different directions, almost in opposite directions in 1994. I think 1994 was a crucial year. And it's not just this infamous Budapest Memorandum where under American pressure, Ukraine gave up its nukes, but also something else happened, is that Yeltsin was on the way out. I mean, his approval rating was just in single digits. And they decided, Yeltsin and his entourage, that they had to stay in power at any cost. And they started Chechen War. That was the resurrection of Imperial Russia. So those forces among, the Yeltsin supporters who could change this outcome, they were defeated badly. It's a long story. Yes, I knew people who tried to push in the opposite direction. They lost. At the same time, Ukraine had a first free and fair elections, and sitting president, Leonid Kravchuk, lost elections to a pro-Russian candidate, by the way, Leonid Kuchma, and walked away. I think Ukrainian experienced something that never, that never happened in Russia, a peaceful transit of power. And that changed everything. So Ukrainians realized that we the people, we are in charge. While in Russia, there was it was just, growing disillusionment about the government, because it's not about us making good choice. Oh, either Yeltsin or communist. So it's always negative. And that's why, again, this is the Russia slided very, very quite rapidly into authoritarianism, and then eventually in KGB dictatorship, because the forces within Russia that could withstand this negative trend, they were too weak. But also, this is something, again, I'm not trying to shift blame to others. And I understand it's wrong. So I always, we all have to share our responsibility. So this is, and I'm not going to deny mine. So for not being successful, I tried, we failed, but it was very difficult to fight the negative trends in Russian politics with the free world offering Yeltsin and then Putin a free hand. I remember in 2006 when I just worked with Boris Nemtsov, late Boris Nemtsov, one of the biggest heroes. And who knows what would have happened if in 1997 Yeltsin would make him a successor and not look for somebody else, with a mafia background. And we tried to actually to communicate back to Russians that, Putin was the wrong guy. How could you convince millions of Russians, even those who were sympathetic to Garry or to Boris, when you have Putin hosting G7? They called G8 at the time. I call it G7 plus one because Russia was never great industrial democracy. And Putin was a host of the event that included, Bush 43 and Sarkozy and Merkel. So he was one of them. How can you convince Russians that he is a dictator or just soon, will lose all the freedom? So back in the 90s, they kept offering Yeltsin incentives without asking anything in return. So that's the lack of policy that help. Again, it doesn't excuse us for losing this. But Russia was in a very precarious position, and we needed this help. And the West never came up with a plan to incorporate Russia. And again, laying down with a system that may have been, just appealing to some of the groups of Russians that still had a chance in the 90s, maybe early 20th, 21st century, to change the course.
You now spend a lot of your time in the United States, and you founded you founded the Renewed Democracy Initiative, which is an American political organization. I guess talking about this, it raises the question for me: to what extent do you still consider yourself Russian in senses good and bad? I mean, how does that word, how does that term and description of you fit for you in present days?
An important question. It's of course less and less. Yes, I still feel a connection to the country. So I was born and raised in the Soviet Union. I was actively engaged in Russian politics. I would like to see. I still say my country, though I left it 12 years ago. I live on Croatian passport and live on a green card here in America. So also vulnerable group. And I believe that the future arrangements of future geopolitical order will depend very much on the outcome of this war. And that's why I'm arguing. I mean, or just not. I'm doing whatever is within my power to make sure Ukraine wins, Russia loses. And that's also something that many people in the free world, they are afraid even to say. They try to find kind of replacement of simple phrase, Ukraine must win, because they know Ukraine must win means Russia must lose. I think, and that's Russian history is my witness. It's for the last 200 years since Napoleonic Wars, every victory in a war made regime stronger and basically, just it killed all the reform. Every geopolitical defeat on the battlefield led to the reforms and offered a chance. So that's why, if something can be done in Russia, if something can influence the minds of Russians, it's only Ukrainian victory. I've been saying it from day one of the full-scale invasion, though, of course, the war started earlier, and I was always on the Ukrainian side, that the imperial virus that has been dominating in the minds of Russians over centuries can be eradicated only by shock, a kind of shock therapy. And nothing short of Ukrainian flag raised in Sevastopol can offer Russia a chance. It may not work, but it's very important that the empire as an idea will be killed. And that's why, I repeat, nothing short of Ukrainians retaking Sevastopol will send a message to many Russians that, you know what, it's over. And now we just have to think about the future. And the future, by the way, either we become Chinese satellite or we try to find a way to reconcile with the free world. It's a chance. because I think many of my compatriots, I still call compatriots, so they they will not choose the free world because of love for democracy. I have no doubt about it. But choosing between China and Europe or the the uh, the free world may be an easy one because it will not the choice they will make by hearts or brains, but by stomachs. And I think this is the way to approach it. Again, a very cynical approach. But everything I'm saying it's irrelevant as long as Putin doing well. Never in Russian history dictator suffered any setbacks as long as people believe he was doing fine on the battlefield. And by the way, it doesn't matter how he's doing in reality. It's about them believing that he's doing fine. And unfortunately, now the way they say it, he's doing fine. The 3 years, three plus years of this war created a country that is just, as we already discussed earlier in this conversation, that by every layer of its society connected to war. And Putin managed to build a system that it's quite beneficial for many Russians, and um, they are no longer they're no longer willing to take their chances with unknown, with democracy, with peace, with peaceful coexistence. Somehow they understand is the way it will work is the collapse of the empire. Because I don't think that if Russia has a chance in the 21st century on beyond, it will not be the same geographical borders. But I will welcome this dissolution of the empire because again, imperial virus is something that is the hardest challenge we have to deal with.
Garry, we talked a little bit about the influence of technology on our societies and the ways in which it can be it can influence our information ecosystems. And as I was preparing for our conversation, I was reading about your match with the IBM supercomputer Deep Blue, and it raised a question for me, which is whether you had had a chance to mess around a little bit with ChatGPT and some large language models recently, and what you think is the potential for this technology to influence our politics and our society.
The potential is great, but as we know, technology in the past brought both good and bad, and it depends. It's who controls it and who uses it for whatever purpose. And I'm I'm not in a panic mode. I'm not here to tell you that we will be reduced to obscurity by the machines, but I think it's time for us to recognize that technology offers opportunities for the unfree world, for dictators and authoritarian leaders, or for terrorists, of all sorts of thugs, to do us harm, and it's a fact. And and we just have to fight back. So technology is just changes everything. Again, going back to the beginning of our conversation. So when you talked about this is Ukrainian war technology, it's a new war now. It just is the war now in Ukraine shows that so many traditional ideas about the battlefield, they are totally outdated. Maybe this is all the thousands of tanks that America has and warplanes that are no longer relevant. Because of the drones. So it's but I think the war also shows that free people, they always have an edge. So it's historic. So there's always an edge, and we just have to push this edge. But simply recognizing that unless we demonstrate convincingly to people in Russia, in China, everywhere that democracy is stronger, more productive, more creative, and is willing to fight back if necessary, we will be we will be always on retreat. It's just look at Africa, for instance, now. So many African countries, they looked around and they're shifting from America, France to Russia because Putin is there. And Americans and French are showing very little interest in appeasing their appetites.
Here in Europe, the European officials that I talk to are having to contemplate the idea of a democratic world without the United States at its core and its center and its leadership. And the it's hard to imagine the period 1945 to 1925 without American democratic leadership, right? It's hard to imagine how many people, how many societies wouldn't have gone in the direction it did without American pressure and American values. But and the question is whether we're seeing a detachment from this trajectory, and whether or not the rest of the world can depend on the United States to be a leader on democratic values for the future, or is it just a coin flip in the future? 50% of the time, you'll get someone who wants good transatlantic relationships and will support NATO, and then 50% of the time, you'll get a totally chaotic, disinterested American administration. Is that the future that lays ahead for us?
Uh, Again, before we talk about the future, let's talk about the past. Why we're here. It's just, it's the chess players now, it's speaking. So we have to analyze the position and understand why we are in such a, not bad situation, but such a dangerous situation. As I already said, the 1991 was the milestone history, and we failed. Actually, we have not failed. We have not even tried to actually offer a new vision. What's late Senator McCain called the League of Democracies, where its people would not just pay lip service, the countries, but would have to act according to the principles that have been embedded in the United Nations system. So democracies were in a very powerful position to dictate the rules. So America decided to look elsewhere, and again, there were many actions, from Clinton administration, from, of course, more from Bush, but it was more like reactive, but not a plan. There was no plan. The plan that Harry Truman and his administration laid down back in 1946-47 to rebuild Europe, to build institutions, to stop communism. And for 40 plus years, it did work. With Republicans or Democrats in the White House, there was a plan. Yeah, there were some, fluctuations, but the strategy was there. After 1991, there was no strategy, and we reached a point where, again, this is the disbalances, both domestic and foreign, in America. They were too obvious. Again, Trump won elections, actually second election, because it's the system, both domestic and global. They had so many, again, I won't call injustices, but disbalances that annoyed people. Let's talk about, defense. Yeah, I mean, say whatever you want about Trump, and I probably agree with you, but he was right saying that Europe, didn't want to invest in defense. By the way, even now, more than 3 years of the war, what Europe did? Nothing. They can't even agree on creating an army. 64,000 too much, 25,000 maybe we can manage. That's the fourth year of the war. So Trump points out, says, yeah, they don't want to invest. Why should we? It's a legitimate question. Now, what is I already mentioned that. What is European Union? Yes, it's nice, when you can, just have the time of peace. You talk about it. You can decide on the size of tomatoes or how to open the bottle. So how about dealing with real challenges, with challenges of war and peace, with life and death? Total failure. They still can't handle, this is the most important issues like Russian frozen funds. It's a problem because it's international community. We have rules. We have Chinese, Saudis. It's war, for God's sake. Can you start talking about war? It's again, Trump was right. I can't believe I'm saying that. Yes, but pointing out that there were many of these disbalances that he wants. Okay, those disbalances cannot be rectified or by using the hammer and or sledgehammer or the saw. It's more like scalpel. You have to be cautious. But the problem is, he doesn't have any other instruments. So he offers simple solutions. But That's what always in history brought dictators or authoritarian leaders on top of power. When they addressed the issues that were real, the issues where the previous democratic government failed to address, and of course they offered their methods. So let's recognize that's some of these policies they based on real grievances of people and disillusionment and again disbalances. And by the way, this is not just Trump here. As we speak now, we are, by the way, witnessing now today the collapse of two-party system in Britain. Okay, we don't have time to talk about it, but basically yesterday at the municipal elections, the Reform Party, which is the British MAGA, trans conservatives, and Labour also has been destroyed as well. So you have now MAGA, call it Nigel Farage Party, and Liberal Democrats that are also rising. So it seems that the world is changing,
Yeah.
and Europe, people who are in charge in Europe, they're not ready to meet these challenges. We'll wait for the government of German government, but I'm skeptical because I have some hopes for Friedrich Merz, for the new chancellor, but the coalition with the Social Democrats, with this old school, and many people within his own party, Christian Democrats, they still believe that we somehow have to go back to great moments, its relations with Russia. We have to do good business. They just don't want to look in the mirror and just and to recognize they're totally out of touch with reality.
Garry, I was speaking to a German official recently who made a very similar point to a point that you made, which is, well, we should at least thank Donald Trump for waking Europe up to the threats of the world around it. And to which I responded, that's like thanking a dog for defecating on your lawn for the fertilizer. There are better ways to do it, right? And my perspective on this is that Donald Trump does not deserve the credit here. He is the cause of some of the danger. He is the cause of some of the danger. And European alienation, I think, has been very poorly covered in the United States. I don't think most Americans really understand the level of both humiliation, how Europeans feel bullied by what was supposed to be a close ally and friend, and the way in which I think European attitudes will change for probably a generation over the way that Trump has acted. Let me.
Yeah,
I know we just
but,
have.
wait, just a little this. But Trump took over from Biden in January this year, so it's just 100+ days. But the war was just has been managed by Biden administration, and let's be objective. They missed at least 2 moments where they could supply Ukraine with weapons to end the war and to destroy Putin's invading armies. But they didn't want Ukraine to win and Russia to lose. So that's again, it's some of the problems we're dealing now. It's resulted from total. I'm trying to be diplomatic. So I don't want to be as critical of the present administration, but it's a matter of life and death. So that's why I probably shouldn't be diplomatic. Of total impotence of Biden administration to back Ukraine the way that they had to. Again,
Garry,
Ukraine must win, and American weapons could have made all the difference. In August, September 2022, it's just when Ukraine had its first massive offensive, so that they had a chance basically to destroy Russian army, not to let them go to the other side of the Dnipro in Kherson. In 2023, America has nearly 12,000 tanks collecting dust. Some of them old, that's not in a good shape, but thousands of tanks collecting dust in the deserts of Nevada and California. America gave Ukraine 31 tanks. 31. So it's so many weapons that have been built exclusively to fight Russians for no other reason. These weapons, not being delivered to Ukraine, and again, it was all a political game. Whether the Congress votes or not. Biden administration could have done much, much more, and not to let Trump and Trump administration to turn this Ukrainian war and tragedy of Ukraine and heroism of Ukraine into the shit show in the White House.
Gary, it's always a sign of a fantastic conversation when we're at the end of our time and we want to go on for double the time. So
Good comment.
I thank you absolutely for being such an engaging speaker and a great conversationalist here. Get the sense from the chat and people who are commenting and watching that this is a widely shared view. And so thank you so much for such an engaging.
Yeah, and Tim, of course, I wish you having the good night coming, a really good night, quiet night, and many more quiet nights. And of course, we will hope that rather sooner than later we can celebrate Ukrainian victory and the victory of the free world with you in Kiev.
Thank you so much. And so for all of my readers and all of your readers, please go up into this top left-hand corner of your screen to subscribe to either my publication or Gary's publication, just to take a
The
look
next move. That's true. That's
at
true.
or the counteroffensive uh, to get his sharp analysis and our human interest reporting from based here in Ukraine, covering folks in democratic societies resisting authoritarianism. Thank you so much,
Thank
Gary.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Good luck. Thank you. Bye.